burnout, ubiquitous technology, and new rules for remote work are kind of killing us softly.
Those three drivers are causing work to no longer work for us. The whole system is going to break, and that break will start with the people within the system. It's us. From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work is changing all of us. Of course, change feels like too small for what's really going on right now. It feels like work is breaking, doesn't it? I think it's fair to say it's that high stakes. And the goal for all of us, indeed the challenge, is that we need to figure out how to change before that work breaks us. Burnout is everywhere. Technology follows us into every corner of our lives. We are still arguing about how many days we should be in the office. But the old models of productivity, they were built for a different era. The Industrial Revolution, when our worth was measured in widgets produced and output per minute. That model doesn't align with work as it exists today. I'm not telling you something you don't know. And if we don't rethink work, well, the system won't just bend, it will break. And that break will start with us. My guest today is Natalie Nixon. She is a creativity strategist and author of the new book, Move, Think, Rest. Natalie says it isn't about figuring out how to be more productive. It's about rethinking what productivity is. She has a framework for this. She calls it the MTR Framework. I love this. It's MTR, Move, Think, Rest. Here's Natalie.
So the first industrial revolution model of productivity is kind of what I call an either-or model. It's based on speed, efficiency. You measure what you can see. And unfortunately, humans often became a cog in the wheel. We also try to kind of mechanize humans. And what's problematic about that is, A, a lot of how we actually do work today doesn't get captured even the way we are trying to count productivity. But it isn't realistic or advantageous in terms of three major drivers that are kind of killing us softly.
Right.
One is burnout. The second is ubiquitous technology. Good news, bad news.
Sure.
And the third is new rules for remote work. And as you know, as a journalist, and I'm a consumer of news, there's a range of companies that are trying to grapple with how many days should people come into work, how many days should they not. So because of burnout, technology, and new rules for remote work, we have an opportunity to redesign and reframe the ways we're thinking about work.
Another way that I might think about that is that those three drivers are causing work to no longer work for us. It's not just that we have an opportunity now to rethink it. It's that the peril of choosing not to rethink it is that this is going to break. The whole system is going to break. And that break will start with the people within the system. It's us. Right. A lot of us are feeling that now, right?
Big time. And for me, the reason why I care about this topic is because I'm a self-proclaimed creativity strategist. I made up my job title. But what that means is what's important to me is to help people connect the dots between creativity and business results. It's important for me to help people think about creativity as a strategic competency and to think about how they can build creativity as a capacity as individuals, as teams, and as organizations. And a lot of the thinking around Move, Think, Rest is to offer a very human-centered operating system, operating model to help us build creativity as a capacity and as a competency that we don't break.
Does it seem to you right now that creativity at its height runs counter to our notion of what productivity is in our culture?
I think so, because creativity is... It's not only just about being additive, but it's also being about thoughtfully subtractive about what we want to edit out. But that's the whole point about creativity is that it requires us to dwell in the ambiguity of process and make choices. And the ways for a lot of leaders, they got to where they are because they were really good at this either or solutions way of thinking. Even though we know that when we get out into the world of work, it's highly ambiguous, and we actually While Henry Winslow Taylor tried to really operationalize every single second and minute and moment, we actually have to be much more adaptive. And creativity and using creativity as a tool, as a competency, helps us to approach our work in a much more adaptive way.
Taylor was really the guy who brought us management consulting. He brought us the idea of efficiency. He is the reason why suddenly a number of inventions made it to market very quickly in the first half of the 20th century, like, I don't know, the light switch or the flush toilet or, frankly, the car.
And Henry Winslow Taylor himself was a very creative man. I think he would wince if he saw the extremes to which we've taken Taylorism.
Well, you talk about VUCA economy. Tell us about the term VUCA.
So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what's interesting is that there's so many frameworks that are used in corporate America that actually come from the military. So it's our military that actually played around first with things like design thinking that really embraces in the role of intuition, because in the military, you're keenly aware that in spite of all the training you have and all the rules, in the moment, you have to strategically, intuitively think through problem solving. So a VUCA environment is an environment that people on a battleground are highly attuned to, but it's also something that in business leaders started to adopt because of the market environment that can be so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
And I think for a lot of us, especially those of us working in large companies that are trying very quickly to adopt a lot of the AI tools that are coming to market, every day kind of feels like a VUCA day.
Yes.
So this brings us to your framework. You have a framework that you introduce, and I want to actually allow you to bring us into it.
Sure. So I'm a frameworks nerd, so I had to.
We love a framework.
First of all, it's not a sequential model. It is situational, and it's meant to be an iterative model. But the model is move, think, rest. And it's grounded in thinking about a different question. To think about asking ourselves, instead of asking ourselves, how might I be more productive this week? How might my team be more productive this quarter? What if we asked, what might I cultivate this week? What might we cultivate this quarter? So movement, think, and rest is an integrative operating system that really says that when we design space and time to more intentionally move and think and rest in a range of ways throughout our workday and work week, we actually will be more efficient, more generative, and produce more inspired work. The cultivation piece is key because as I was thinking through writing this book and saying, well, what am I responding to? If I'm responding to old ways of thinking about productivity, the Industrial Revolution, how did people generally work before the first Industrial Revolution? And I surmise that most societies around the world were agrarian-based economies.
Yeah.
In an agrarian-based economy, the MO is cultivation. Cultivation, in my view, is a much more both-and model. And what I mean by that is that if you think about who does the work, where the work takes place, how it gets done, cultivation values the solo practitioner and the collective. Cultivation values quick spurts of growth and slow, dormant, what's percolating, what's marinating. And cultivation also values, yes, we measure what we see, that matters, but also we value what's dormant, right? What's happening in the invisible realm. So movement, thought, and rest is this operating system that acknowledges that if we want to produce our most creative, innovative, inspired work, we won't do that if we're only focused on output that requires that cognitive frontal neocortex work, which we think is where our best work comes from. I started to observe a pattern in myself where every time I was procrastinating, stepped away from the desk, went for a walk, unloaded the dishwasher, maybe try to get in a chapter of reading some fiction, why not? I would come back to the work at hand, and my thinking was sharper. An idea that I had been stuck on, it just got unglued and it synchronized better. And that's what got me to thinking about a new operating system, a new way to think about work, but not just for individuals, for how do we do this at work for teams and for organizations on the whole as well.
That culture piece feels like the tricky part. Now, I want to start by just making sure that I understand that the goal is the same, right? The goal is how do we maximize our output of truly creative, innovative, breakthrough ideas, widgets, whatever it is that we are creating. Right?
Yeah. The goal is not to add one more thing to your to-do list. The goal is not to say, oh gosh, now I've got to put nap rooms in every office building. No. And I'm not saying that you have to add in an exercise class. You could if that makes sense for you.
Right.
But there are ways to integrate this way of moving, thinking, and resting into our weeks.
Well, so I want to examine all three terms briefly. I want to run through them. But in service of what you just said, that the goal is not to lengthen your to-do list, I want to share this this phrase that was kind of a new phrase for me, movement hygiene.
Yeah.
That speaks to me, to this idea that like it's not about moving more. It's about a different quality to the movement.
Yes.
Right? So let's start with movement. Let's start with move. What do you mean by that?
Well, if we have movement hygiene, first of all, and this is an example of how integrative this model is, we're thinking more as well about when and how we move. And movement hygiene also requires us to get out of our head and into our body, right? It requires us to find ways to stand up more. And maybe for some people, that's a standing desk. If that's too expensive, maybe you can hack your standing desk and you have a box, or you have a pile of books. But it also means that we're incorporating movement through breaks, through more micro breaks. Again, the integration of the three. I did almost 60 interviews to complete this book. And I would hear sometimes people reflect on, well, I don't always have time for a 30-minute walk or, to go to an exercise class. You don't even need that much time. If you have 5 minutes, I work from home, so I have walks in my neighborhood that I know are going to be 3 minutes long, if that's what I can afford, budget-wise of time. I have walks if I have a lot of time, maybe it's a 15-minute walk.
Yeah.
But it's important to plan it and to write it down, to make it part of what your day is going to look like.
So you open your move section with the story of and I remember when you did this, an incredible swim that you took, that you began to train to take.
Yeah.
And that struck me as not just walking around the block. There was significance to the fact that you set yourself a movement goal that was beyond what maybe not what you believed you had the capacity for, but something that was a real stretch.
Big time.
Yes, big time. What was the significance of that?
So there's two swims that I referenced. I think this is the swim when I was in Greece.
Yes, that's...
Yeah. I left a 16-year career in academia where we had this working environment where I realized, reflecting back on it after I left, you always had these opportunities to build your professional capacity, to have learning development. And so I promised myself as an entrepreneur that I would always, once a year, have a personal development experience that I would do and a professional development experience that I would do. So this particular year in 2023, I thought it was personal. It's turned out it's added value to me professionally, was to try open water swimming. I did not grow up swimming competitively. I was used to swimming in a pool with a black lane and ropes and all that sort of thing. And the first day I bombed. I had a panic attack. I had all these arms and legs flailing around me. I couldn't catch my breath cadence. And I reckoned with myself, okay, I'm going to be one of the slowest people in the group. And the next day I showed up to the swim really accepting that's where I am. And I got out of the self-judgment and just was swimming long, extended strokes. And by the end of that first day, after the guides observed us, they said, actually, Natalie, you need to be in that faster group. But it turned out a few things I learned. I got out of my head and into my body. I stopped the self-judgment. I also, the way I tend to like to swim, long strokes is the best way to swim in open water. What I took back from that experience was the power of envisioning, the power of being able to observe and learn from others who are much better than you at things, who are struggling in a certain area that you've struggled at, and how do they adapt to it. And I brought that sensibility and that mindset, that humility, that curiosity back to my work.
I think the thing that I that I keep coming back to when I think about that example in your book is the moment when you had the realization that actually this was mind work that you needed to be doing in this physical body of yours. And that to accomplish this massive challenge, this physical challenge, you needed the integration. You needed the mind and the body to work together. And Natalie, I feel like that happens to me all of the time with knowledge work, where I set a big stretch and then I just lean on my head to get there. And I'm not able to get there. And the thing that your book unlocks for me is like, oh, maybe movement can be a tool to help me.
Totally.
Right? So let's move on to think. So what do we usually get wrong about think?
So I'm a big daydreamer.
Yeah.
And been a big daydreamer since I've been at your children's age. And my report cards always said Natalie is progressing fine. She does tend to daydream a little bit too much out the window. But that's something I've held on to in my life. And as I researched this book, it turns out that things like mind wandering are really important for us to unlock the default mode network in the brain. Mm-hmm. So when I'm talking about thinking, I'm not only talking about cognition and mental clarity. That matters.
Yeah.
What I think we forsake is that two of the things that help us get to better mental clarity are what I call backcasting and forecasting. So backcasting is reflection, memory, being able to dwell in metacognition a little bit. Why do I think the way I think? Why do we as a team think the way we think? Now that I've gotten this answer, now that ChatGPT or Claude or Notebook LM or whatever has summarized this article for me in 3.7 seconds, now what?
Yeah.
Now we have time for spaciousness. Now we have time to think critically. That's the backcasting, kind of in the moment thinking I'm exploring. The forecasting is about dreaming. It's about daydreaming. It's about imagination. It's about curiosity. And curiosity gets sparked in all of those temporal domains, in backcasting, in the present moment, and in future thinking. So the reason why that matters, especially when we think about reflection, about dreaming, is that it is unlocking the DMN.
Yeah.
And the default mode network happens when we tap out of the world.
Yeah.
It happens when we are just getting up from a nice rest. The shower moments, right? It unlocks different neural synapses in the brain that is actually where the best synchronicity of ideas happens. It's not going to happen if we keep staring at the page or at the screen, or it's going to happen when we drop out.
Yeah.
We I use the word marinate. I know that's not the neuroscientist way of explaining it, but I think of the default mode network as kind of the washing machine for the brain.
Yeah.
It actually is then that it's also actually happening when we're in movement, when we're exercising, when we go for a walk, when we're not thinking about the task at hand, so that all of these juicy bits get to kind of click and lock into place.
Yeah. There was one point at which you talked about meditation. I loved it. You called meditation essentially a strength training.
For me, I'm not a good meditator, but it's really, I've learned though, as I write about the book, there's also something called kinesthetic meditation, right? So when I am swimming in a swimming pool of a black lane and the chords, and I'm counting, right? That's a kind of kinesthetic meditation. Runners can get into that mode. Walkers can get into that mode. I was happy to learn that I actually do dip into meditation every now and then.
Movement is definitely my only form of meditation. I've actually tried meditation as I think because I'm a parent of young children who don't sleep through the night, I just fall asleep. That's what happens. I'm embarrassed to say it, but I sit down and fall asleep.
Happens to a lot of us.
It kind of takes us to rest, which is different than sleeping, by the way.
It is.
But what do we need to understand about rest?
That we will burn out if we don't find times to rest. And I wanted to think about rest in a scalable way. Mm-hmm. So it's not just sleeping. Sleeping is really important. We need to be breaking up our day into different discrete chapters of rest. I learned a lot from the work of John Medina, who's written this great series of books called Brain Rules. in his view, we should probably be sitting and doing task type of work or, heavy concentration work for no more than 30 to 40 minutes at a time. And then we should be getting up, doing something totally different, having a conversation with someone. He also, in his work, says the ideal workspace would have some sort of the equivalency of a gymnasium at its core so that people can do some sort of movement. But the rest part, it involves everything from micro breaks throughout the day. And I time my micro breaks. And it doesn't mean that you step away and you go on your phone.
Checking Instagram does not constitute
No,
a
but it could be
microbreak.
a daydream break. But also to think about scaling rest in terms of, I was really interested in the role of sabbatical. So as a former academic, you are granted a sabbatical every 7 years. A lot of companies in the tech sector grant their employees a sabbatical every 5 years.
Yeah.
What was fascinating and heartbreaking to me is that not everyone takes advantage of the sabbatical, right? And that has to do with lack of modeling. That has to do with culture, and there's FOMO. Spoiler
Huge.
alert, work is kind of a soap opera. Like, you'll catch up, you'll get back into it. And when I interviewed people who had taken sabbatical from healthcare companies, tech companies like Meta, some of them is more family time. For some of them, it was just to hang out in my house a little bit more and learn how to knit and just get into cooking. For others, it was to do something very specifically. And in each case, and the research shows this as well, when people come back from a sabbatical, they show up in a much more energized way. They have a lot more, especially if that's a requirement. What did you learn? What did you do that we can learn from as a team that will add value to the ways we work? So thinking about rest from a policy perspective as an organization, from the way we design space in our homes, in our offices, but also the ways that we can have some agency in our day. Again, it doesn't have to be an hour. It's amazing. Again, it's the default mode network that's able to kick in when we step away and do this resting.
Yeah. So you introduced so many ways that we can shift how we think about our orientation to work. It's almost like there are too many ways here. Where do I start? In an integrative system, let me tell you, there's not a hierarchy here. There's not an in-order to-do list.
No. The book is very prescriptive in that each chapter ends with reflection questions for you to think about as an individual, for your team to consider, for the organization to consider, and proactive exercises, right? But a place to start, let's start with the biggest artifact of every organization, the meeting.
Ooh.
You can tell so much about the culture of a place, of a team, of an organization by meetings. When do meetings happen? How long are they? Who gets to lead the meetings? All the things, right? So one place to start is to start by redesigning meetings. And you don't have to redesign the entire meeting. One of the things I suggest is just maybe you start with the intro or outro of the meeting. Yeah. Maybe in a 40-minute, a 30-minute meeting, what if in the first 5 minutes you start out with something called question storming, right? So, which is interesting, right? Because as my colleague and bud Warren Berger likes to say, he's the author of A More Beautiful Question, asking questions is a way of thinking. And what that does, question storming is something where there's a topic. Let's say it's jelly beans, I don't know, or maybe it's a new marketing strategy if we're being more serious here. But there's a topic and you give people 60 seconds to generate 5 questions around jelly beans or around the current marketing strategy, quietly to themselves. This can be done on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. It can be done in person. And quietly to myself, I'm just going to generate 5. And if I'm feeling really invigorated, maybe I get to 7 or 8 questions. Then you pair people off, share the questions. And, it's interesting, Jessi, we came up with kind of similar questions. Maybe we do kind of a mashup of our questions. And then we share with the larger group. So 60 seconds just to myself, 2 minutes, pair off, maybe the remaining 2 minutes, you are sharing? What's from your pairing, what's a question that you want to share with the group? What that does is it democratizes the thinking. It's a different way of thinking. You've kind of put a pause into the day before the meeting, and it democratizes the ideas. I have found whenever brainstorming is designed in that way, I don't feel like my idea, or my thought, or my question didn't get picked, or my question got picked, right? There's kind of the blurred lines. So starting out the meeting with question storming, with a dance break. Maybe you collectively pull a Spotify list of the team's favorites, energizing songs, and that's what you do, right? So,
Natalie, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to imagine the culture of my team being what it is. And it's a great culture, but I'm trying to imagine if I were like, okay, now we're going to start this meeting with the dance break.
Okay, so that's not your jam.
But
cool.
Yes, that's not my jam. And also, like, part of the call to action of the book is to be a little bit more flexible in our thinking.
Very
flexible. To be
flexible.
willing to try things, right?
And movement, thought, and rest helps us to be more flexible, more adaptive, so that we can unlock the creativity that is essential for right now, for the future of work. The way I'm talking about creativity is not only about picking up a paintbrush or taking a dance class. I think about creativity as our ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems and deliver novel value. And if you begin to think of it in terms of that wonder-rigor theory, then the best attorneys, CFOs, secretaries, farmers, teachers, plumbers, and artists are super creative. Well, how do we do that toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems? And why does that matter? The World Economic Forum in their 2023 Future Job Skills Report predicted that by 2027, creativity will rank as the number 2 job skill. The first is critical thinking.
Yeah.
Research by Market Splash and McKinsey and all sorts of other organizations have learned through their research that something like 55 to 60% of CEOs recognize that creativity is a critical skill for leadership, recognize that it's really significant for market competitiveness.
Yeah.
Yet, only like 52 to 55% of employees report having time throughout the year to be creative. And the reason why creativity matters in a time of ubiquitous technology and AI is that yes, we can get the answers more quickly. Yes, we can do a lot of cognitive offload. And then what? What's the so what? What do we do with that? We still need our imagination. We still need the use of intuition combined with rational strategic decision-making in order to add value to these results. And the way that we will become more adaptive and flexible in our thinking is by designing more movement and thought and rest in the ways I'm advocating for in the book.
That was Natalie Nixon, author of the new book, Move, Think, Rest. Go check it out right now. And there is so much that I want you to walk away from this episode thinking about. First, Natalie isn't abandoning productivity. She is abandoning our current strategy for achieving it. She's saying it doesn't work. And if we want to be more productive, we are going to have to rethink that strategy entirely. Which brings me to point number 2. Natalie offers us a framework for how to do it. She calls it the MTR Framework. That's move, think, rest. This is not a checklist, y'all. This is not a list of things that you can get done over the course of your day. It is an entirely new orientation to these ideas. Which brings us to number 3. If you truly employ the MTR Framework, what you get is creativity. True creativity. And that matters because, the World Economic Forum calls out creativity as the second most important job skill for the coming decade. Now, creativity isn't something we can unlock with a list. It's not something that we will get to if we keep doing more. We have to find a new way. And I hope you will think in whatever way you do about your own practice, in your own orientation to creativity. Now, we're going to talk about all this and so much more on Office Hours this week. If you haven't been yet, well, this is your invitation. I get together every Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern with Sarah Storm and a lot of our regulars. Come meet the gang. We would love to see you. You can find the link in show notes, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. And if you like this episode, well, send it to a friend any way you like. Okay, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. I'm Jessi Hempel. I'll be right back here with more Hello Monday next week.